it doesn't have to access that programming anymore. Now it's programmed in on the loop. You're like, oh, now we play. Now, when we go through life and we have different bumps on our record or scratches, that's what I like to call PTSD, or these big events that are programmed in. We get those and they come up at different times or different periods due to triggers. So how do you go in and reprogram that in real time? As in, some people can't take 3 or 4 months off and just unplug for the world and go out and just reconnect. And the reason why that works is because you're reprogramming during that space of time, and you have that space to be devoid of all the distractions that could be triggering. And then when you go back, you've been programmed in a new environment that doesn't get triggered by this old environment. But when you're in the thick of life, you have to actually not repress and go in and do the work to overcome those PTSD things that trigger and they pop up in our life. So in the last video, I talked about it being like a record. The record is playing and playing, and there's these scratches and these bumps. And with our personality, it's playing and recording at exactly the same time. So when you use a character trigger, what you're doing is you're controlling all of your energy before it starts writing on the record. It's reading at the same time of how do I act, and then it's writing on the record for your future character at the same time. When you control your energy, you basically lift the needle and you can slide in the new programming. So you have this blank space that's ready to be programmed. You're not reading from a pre-written program, and now you have this block of how am I going to put this in here? Well, you use a character trigger, and then you go back to that character sheet that you made, and that's the information that you're going to plug in. And how do you do this? You need to do this when you're in a state of sheer panic and chaos. Why? Well, that is because your body will become used to, and your brain will become used to, when it gets in just full-on panic mode, that basically the needle's lifted and it no longer references the past for how to conduct itself in panic and chaos. And then you slide in that character sheet of this is how the character performs in this moment in time or in this period, and then you let it go. And it starts getting programmed in. And you do that through extreme physical fitness or an exercise that seems to be easy, and then you do it until it's just ridiculous. And then your body's in chaos. What happens is your body starts to learn in life then, when you're going around and you get triggered, that, oh, I am learning in the brain that this new process happens when panic and chaos start to ensue, that the record is lifted and this new program is inserted on how to conduct myself. Or not myself, but this biomechanical operating system that goes out into the body and controls the energy output into the world. So you take that and you start learning or starting to realize that the hard work on programming in the character trigger pays off without having to do any hard work when you would normally start to get triggered. Because I've mentioned in another video before that those old triggers start triggering the healthy coping mechanisms, or just the healthy way of being without being touched by the outside world. This is basically a cheat code to circumvent all of that. So the old situations where you hear somebody screaming or sirens or fireworks or anything of that nature that might trigger your body to go into chaos, it starts to trigger that, but it realizes, oh, here's where we go now. And that goes back to all the planning and the hard work of sitting down and creating your logo or symbol, that's the word, and then your full out character sheet, your vision, learning your breath work, learning your trigger point, doing your reading of your character sheet at night and in the morning, and associating that with your symbol. And when you're doing all that work and you're creating those processes to create a new marker in the brain, you're doing work that's in your brain to shift your neural pathways so the energy does not get sent to those old markers anymore. That's basically activating old programming that is no longer applicable. The programming will be there, but it will get harder and harder to access as the brain learns that, oh, this is the only place I go to now, to the center hub where I'm going to make all choices and receive programming from this location, and no longer programming from a subroutine that's been put in that I'm not aware of in the past. If that makes sense and you're tracking on it, it is a miracle worker. So when you take PTSD, or these markers that are in the brain that activate all these processes in the body, it's not PTSD, it's just programming that's getting funneled a whole lot of energy to play a memory in your mind, to activate emotions, to activate body movement, to activate words, thought processes, and a whole variety of things in this biomechanical machine. You override where that energy is going, and you circumvent tons of other processes, or sitting on couches taking a ton of pills. When you go in, you're like, I'm going to create a new character, and this is how it's done. It really is how it's done. I've done it myself, and the people in my life do not know how to take me anymore. They don't get it, because I have changed from the inside out by reprogramming the character. So let's say the character reel, or the ego, goes in a figure 8. And right here in the figure 8 is where your energy goes through. And the energy is reading and writing. So there's one band on that figure 8 where it's reading, oh, how do I act? Then the other band is recording, and that band is going to come back around and play again and record again. It takes longer to record new programming the older you get. And when they're like, oh, they'll never change. Well, that's because they've never purposely written new programs on there. So let's take the brain, and then you have your figure 8, which is the reel that is read off of and programmed on. And then the programming is coming from in the brain. So let's say we come up to a situation we haven't come up to in a really long time, and it's reading on the character reel of like, I'm not really sure how to do. And then in a split second, it accesses all these files and data of like, what's the best way to act in this situation? And it may pull up one from your childhood that you don't need, and it puts it up right there. And it's like, what the F just happened? I went bonko. I don't even know why. Well, the brain accessed a piece of programming that it thought was applicable in the scenario that it's receiving from the external world. But what happened is it brought that old programming up to the part that's supposed to be read from, but then it also got programmed in back here at the same time. So the next time it loops back around, it doesn't have to access that programming anymore. Now it's programmed in on the loop to be like, oh, now we play. But the goal is when it gets around there and you know it's about to come up, that you lift that needle off and you have your own script of your character that you've been putting deep inside your psyche. And that's when you do it in the character trigger. So when you have trained physically and you've programmed in your new character that way, when you come back around on this loop, the mind is going to automatically access that new reference for how to conduct itself in unknown high stressful situations instead of accessing any old programming from the past. I'm done with that, and I'm going to keep beating a dead horse on a character trigger because it will change your life.